A World Cup hat-trick at 39, 7 straight tournament games with a goal, something no human had ever managed, and Miroslav Klose's all-time World Cup record erased. In the summer of 2026, an ageing legend was supposed to fade politely. Instead, Lionel Messi is dismantling a World Cup while barely breaking into a jog. So, how is one of the oldest stars at the tournament the most dangerous? And why are defenders young enough to be his sons still a full second too slow? Time was supposed to win this one. In the year 2000, a quiet 13-year-old stepped off a plane in Barcelona with his father and a medical file that read like a verdict: growth hormone deficiency. His body had simply decided to stop building itself. The treatment cost around $900 a month, money his family back in Rosario, Argentina did not have and could not raise. His father, Jorge, uprooted the entire family's life on the promise of a European club that might, just might, fix his son. It was an enormous gamble on a boy who, on paper, had every reason to fail. Everyone who had watched him play back home knew the truth. This boy was a freak of nature. The cruel joke was that nature had also decided to keep him the size of a 10-year-old. Barcelona had seen the tapes, and in a moment that has since curdled into legend, a club director, worried the deal would slip away, offered him a contract on the only paper within reach: a napkin. The club would pay for the medicine. The kid would grow, in theory. La Masia, Barcelona's famous academy, was not built to be kind to small boys with strange accents. The Catalan kids mocked the way he spoke. Coaches looked at his frame and saw a medical liability, not a future god. He barely spoke to anyone. He was homesick, undersized, and foreign in every way that matters to a teenager. For months, he was the smallest, quietest, loneliest thing in the building. But there was one detail the doubters kept missing. When the ball arrived at his feet, the teasing stopped. The bigger, stronger boys who were supposed to bully him off the pitch spent whole sessions chasing a shadow that kept the ball tied to its bootlaces. Grown academy coaches watched a child dribble through their best defenders and went quiet. Eventually, the older players did something strange. They went to the manager and lobbied on his behalf. Play the little one. Please, just watch him. They had no idea what they were asking for, because Barcelona's first team was about to inherit a problem that would take the rest of world football 20 years to solve. And the solution to that problem would eventually be so bizarre, so counterintuitive, that when the boy finally unlocked it, coaches everywhere would refuse to believe their own eyes. October the 16th, 2004, 17 years old. Messi walked onto the pitch against Espanyol as at that point, the youngest player ever to represent the club in an official match. He looked less like a professional footballer and more like a ball boy who had wandered onto the field during a stoppage.
Huge thanks to our sponsor, OK Jersey. If you're looking to add high-quality kits to your collection from the latest 2026 season to iconic retros, they've got you covered starting at just £15. Please use my promo code MAUS to get an 8% discount.
Then the 1st of May, 2005 arrived. Ronaldinho slipped a lofted pass over the top, and Messi, 17, dinked a delicate chip over the goalkeeper for his first Barcelona goal against Albacete. He was so small and so young that Ronaldinho scooped him up and sat him on his shoulders, a grown superstar carrying a toddler off a playground. The numbers that first season were nothing to write home about. 1 league goal, 7 appearances, a promising kid, no more. That summer, the promising kid became a prophecy. At the 2005 Under-20 World Cup in the Netherlands, Argentina started slowly, then handed the tournament to their teenager and let him drag them to the title. He scored the equaliser against Colombia. He tore Spain apart in the quarter-final. He put Argentina ahead against their bitter rivals Brazil. And in the final against Nigeria, he scored both goals from the penalty spot to win it 2-1. 6 goals in total. The Golden Ball as the best player, the Golden Boot As the top scorer, the newspapers reach for the only word Argentina keeps in reserve for this kind of talent: Maradona. It was a comparison heavy enough to crush a lesser mind. Messi wore it like a coat that finally fit. His teammates saw it up close and could not shut up about it. When a magazine asked Ronaldinho whether he was the best player in the world, the reigning Ballon d'Or winner laughed and said he was not even the best player at Barcelona. He pointed at the quiet kid. "My little brother," he called him. "He is going to be excellent." Excellent turned out to be the understatement of the century. For a while, the wider football world was slow to catch on. This was the era of the Galacticos, of established superstars with global fame, and the press kept its cameras trained on the famous names. The teenager quietly ripping defences apart on the wing was, for a season or two, still an opening act. That would not last. Back in Spain, Barcelona pointed him at the right wing and set him loose on grown men. What followed was a young man playing football like every defender had personally insulted his family. He kept the ball welded to his left foot and ran straight at people until they fell over, roughly 7 successful dribbles a game, long hair streaming behind him. Fans came to watch Messi and left swearing they had seen Maradona's ghost in a Barcelona shirt. Then came the season the football gods clearly wrote as fan fiction. 2006 into 2007. A hat-trick against Real Madrid in a 3-all Clasico at 19 years old, in a stadium that wanted him embarrassed. A cheeky handball goal against Espanyol that copied Maradona's infamous Hand of God, because apparently one homage in a season was not enough. And then, against Getafe, the goal, he collected it deep in his own half. He beat one man, then another. Then he simply kept running, past defenders who lunged and grabbed at air, past a keeper who committed and lost, before sliding it into an empty net. It was an almost shot-for-shot remake of Maradona's goal of the century from the 1986 World Cup. The universe at this point was not even trying to be subtle. Everything was aligned. His teammates believed. The crowd worshipped. Argentina's manager Jose Pekerman told him flatly that he would become the best player in the world. Fate itself seemed to be quietly filling out the paperwork. And that is exactly when his own body tried to end the whole story. Between 2006 and 2008, Messi suffered 7 separate muscle injuries. 4 of them were hamstring tears. Inside the club, the medical staff began asking a quiet, sickening question. What if this boy's body simply cannot survive the way he plays? What if the most gifted footballer anyone had seen in 50 years was built on legs that would tear themselves apart before he even reached his prime? The electric winger was burning out his own wiring sprint by sprint. Someone was going to have to rebuild him from the ground up. And the man about to do it was going to give him an instruction that made no sense to anyone watching. He was going to tell Lionel Messi to stop running. In the summer of 2008, Pep Guardiola took charge of Barcelona and immediately started selling legends. Ronaldinho, the man who had literally carried Messi on his shoulders, was sold to Milan for not taking training seriously enough. Deco was shown the door. Samuel Eto'o, one of the greatest African players in history, was put firmly on notice. The message to the dressing room was cold and simple. No player is bigger than the system. Not even the boy everyone was calling the future. Messi understood instantly. He handed back the number 19 and pulled on the number 10. Maradona's number. The apprenticeship was over. Off the pitch, Guardiola was obsessive about fitness, and Messi bought in completely. A strict new diet reshaped his body and cut down the injuries that had nearly derailed him. On the pitch, Pep built a style of short, fluid, almost hypnotic passing that made football look like geometry set to music, with Messi at the centre of it, as both the conductor and the man finishing the symphony. Then Guardiola did something no coach before him had dared. He looked at his most electric player, a winger addicted to sprinting and dribbling, and told him to save it, to walk, to stop chasing fullbacks up and down the touchline as if his career depended on covering every blade of grass. The idea crystallized before a match against Real Madrid. Guardiola spotted a gap, a stretch of no man's land between Madrid's midfield and their centre-backs that nobody was patrolling. So he pulled Messi off the wing and dropped him into the middle, into that gap, as a false nine, a striker who was not really a striker at all. 30 metres of open grass to attack into, with defenders who had no idea whether to follow him or hold their line. Guardiola later said that single decision changed the history of Barcelona and the history of Messi. He was not exaggerating, because the walking was never laziness. The walking was reconnaissance. Here is what almost nobody understood at the time. When Messi slows his legs down, his eyes speed up. He spends those quiet minutes scanning, his head turning constantly, right, left, right, taking photograph after photograph of the pitch, where the defenders are standing, who is already breathing hard, which channel is about to crack open. Guardiola put it in a sentence that has haunted defenders ever since. Right, left, right. He smells who is the weak point of the back four. After 5-10 minutes, he has the map, not of the field, of the enemy. While every other player on the pitch stared at the ball, Messi was watching everything else. So by the time the ball actually reached him, he had already decided what to do with it before it touched his foot. The slowness was not a flaw to hide. It was the ambush itself. One of his later Barcelona managers, Ernesto Valverde, described it almost like espionage. Messi, he said, treats the opening minutes of a match like a scouting mission. He wanders around the opposition defence looking utterly uninterested, barely bothering to ask for the ball, drifting like a man clocking in for a shift he does not want. Except he is not bored. He is gathering intelligence. He is quietly building a working model of the defence, and only once he has found the weak seam does he decide to strike it. The blank expression is not disengagement, it is a poker face. And it only worked because Guardiola built the whole team around protecting it. When Barcelona lost the ball, the nearest players were ordered to swarm it and win it back within seconds, before the opposition could even breathe. That way, Messi rarely had to sprint 50 yards back toward his own goal. He could stay high, saving his fuel, ready to strike. The rest of the team did the ugly running so their genius never had to. The results were biblical. In his first full season under Pep, Messi's game transformed. Fewer wasteful solo runs, far more killer passes. His assists exploded. Barcelona won everything within reach. In May 2009, they walked into the Bernabeu and took Real Madrid apart 6-2. A scoreline Madrid supporters still refuse to discuss over dinner. Days later, Messi rose above Manchester United in the Champions League final in Rome and headed home the second in a 2-0 win. Across that calendar year, Barcelona lifted 6 trophies out of 6 available. A clean sweep of everything. The sextuple. The sick kid who could not grow was now the beating engine of the best team on earth. And yet, incredibly, all of this was only the warm-up act. Because over the next 3 years, Messi was going to put up numbers so absurd that it would not just be journalists trying to explain him, it would be scientists. For 4 straight seasons, Lionel Messi stopped being an athlete and became a math problem. In April 2010, he put 4 goals past Arsenal in a single Champions League night, and even Arsenal's own fans mostly just held their hands up in surrender. In 2011, Barcelona met Manchester United again in the Champions League final at Wembley and delivered a lesson so total that United's own players later called it one of the most humbling nights of their careers. Rio Ferdinand, one of the finest defenders of his generation, described standing on the halfway line next to Nemanja Vidic, looking at each other and realising they were losing badly without having laid a hand on anyone. Messi, he said, was so small and so quick that when you tried to rough him up, he simply slipped underneath the challenge and was gone. A magician, Ferdinand called him. Coming from the man whose entire job was to stop him, that is not analysis. That is a white flag. Then came the seasons that broke the record books in half. In 2011 into 2012, Messi scored 73 goals in 60 games across all competitions, a single season total that still looks like a printing error. In the 2012 calendar year, he scored 91 goals, 91 in 1 year. He overtook Cesar Rodriguez to become Barcelona's all-time top scorer at just 24, erasing a record that had stood for more than 50 years. He won 4 Ballons d'Or in a row, the first man in history to do it. To put those 91 goals in perspective, that is nearly 2 goals a week, every single week, for an entire year, against professional defenders who spent that whole year knowing exactly who was coming and still failing to stop him. Numbers like that do not come from muscle. And this is the moment the story stops being about football and starts being about how humans actually perceive time. Consider something that should be impossible. A baseball fastball reaches home plate in about 400 milliseconds. A human brain needs roughly 200 of those milliseconds just to register that the ball is even moving and fire the first signal toward the muscles. That warm advice to keep your eye on the ball is a comforting lie. Nobody can track an object moving that fast, that close to their face. A boxer's jab, like Muhammad Ali's, could travel from first flicker of movement to your chin in around 40 milliseconds, faster than you can blink. No human being is reacting to that. So how do elite athletes hit the unhittable and dodge the undodgeable? Scientists call it anticipatory skill, and it has almost nothing to do with fast reflexes. Researchers like Janet Starks and Bruce Abernathy froze video of opponents mid-action and asked athletes to predict what came next. The elite performers read the answer from body position alone, often before the ball had even been struck. The novices just stared at the ball, helpless, watching the wrong thing. Here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. When the baseball legend Albert Pujols was brought into a laboratory and tested on raw reaction time, pressing a button the instant a light flashed, he scored in the 66th percentile, barely above average for a normal adult. For 22 years he obliterated pitches thrown at 95 miles an hour anyway. His gift was never his reflexes, it was his prediction. And that prediction only exists because of something psychologists call chunking. Through thousands of hours of exposure, the brain stops processing raw chaos piece by piece and starts compressing it into familiar patterns. A pitcher's entire wind-up collapses into one recognizable unit. A defense's shape becomes a single readable chunk. It was first proven in chess, where grandmasters could glance at a real game board for a few seconds and rebuild it perfectly from memory. But when researchers scattered the pieces at random into positions no real game would ever produce, the grandmasters were suddenly no better than beginners. They never had photographic memory at all. They had a vast library of patterns, and you had just handed them a page in a language they did not speak. You can even break it the other way. In 2004, Pujols and a lineup of other elite major league hitters stepped in against the softball pitcher Jenny Finch. She threw slower than any big league pitcher, from a closer distance, underhand, and they could not touch her. Not a hit, barely a foul ball. Alex Rodriguez reportedly refused to even try. It was not that her pitches were harder, it was that these men had spent their entire lives reading the overhand mechanics of a pitcher's shoulder and arm. Finch's windmill delivery gave their prediction engines nothing familiar to read. Strip away the pattern, and the greatest hitters on earth become ordinary men swinging at air. You can watch the same machinery run in reverse. In one experiment, researchers crossed a ball toward a player and then cut every light in the stadium mid-flight. An amateur was left flailing in the dark, nowhere near it. An elite forward in total blackness still headed it cleanly into the net because his brain had already computed the ball's path before the lights ever went out. He did not need to see it arrive. He had seen enough to know where it would be. The same trick runs through American football. Track the eyes of an average quarterback and you see him staring straight at the receiver he wants. Track the eyes of a great one and you see something else entirely. He looks at the empty spaces between players, reading the relationships, predicting where the gap will open 2 seconds from now. One NFL great admitted he probably only truly saw about half the receivers he ever threw to. He described it like standing in a lobby, watching cars flash past between the pillars of a window, catching only fragments, and deciding from those fragments exactly where to throw. A grandmaster playing speed chess with a helmet on, and the pattern can be weaponized on purpose. Coaches now deliberately hunt for pitchers who release the ball from wildly different heights and arm angles, because throwing a hitter 2 opposite deliveries back to back forces his prediction engine to rebuild itself from scratch between innings. Confuse the map, and even a professional freezes. Now put all of that together, and you finally understand what Messi is doing while he strolls around looking bored. He is not resting, he is reading. He has been building his pattern library since he was 5 years old on the pitches of Rosario. Every defender's hip angle, every gap between the lines, every tired step of a fullback feeds the map. By the time he chooses to move, the map is already drawn, and everyone around him is a full second behind reality. He was a grandmaster playing speed chess against opponents who had only just learned how the pieces move. You can see the geometry inside a single one of his goals. There is a famous strike against Athletic Bilbao where he is surrounded, 3 defenders converging, seemingly nowhere to go. So he stops. He takes 1 small step inward, and suddenly every defender around him sits at the maximum possible distance, buying him the sliver of space and time he needs to slip through all 3. Researchers who study the mathematics of his movement describe it in exactly those terms. He does not just beat defenders, he reorganises the space they are trying to control until the geometry itself is quietly working for him. Clubs have literally hired mathematicians to model it and find a defensive answer. They are still looking. But there is one weakness buried deep inside this superpower, and the scientists will tell you exactly what it is. Anticipation only works while the patterns stay familiar. And in the seasons ahead, Messi's own body was about to hand his opponents a problem that no pattern library on Earth could solve. By 2013, the bill for 2 years of single-handedly carrying a club finally came due. The injuries that had stalked his early career came back, and this time they bit down harder. For the first time, people began whispering the word every great athlete dreads: decline. Marco van Basten, one of the finest strikers who ever lived, had his career amputated by ankle problems while still near his peak. If Messi got this wrong, the same tragedy was sitting in the waiting room with his name on the chart. He had a choice: push his body harder and gamble that it would hold, or humble himself and change. Messi, who has never been a fool, changed. He stopped leaning on the relentless sprinting of his youth and leaned instead on positioning, timing, and that endlessly scanning brain. He ran less, he hurt less, he stayed lethal. The flare dimmed a little, the threat did not. Then Barcelona handed him a weapon that bordered on unfair. In 2014, Luis Suarez arrived to line up alongside Messi and Neymar, forming the trio the world would come to call MSN. By many accounts, it was the most devastating attack club football has ever assembled. In their very first season together, they won the treble, the league, the cup, and the Champions League. MSN scored 122 goals in a single campaign, a record for an attacking trio in Spain. The trio only got more ruthless. The following season, they broke their own record, and Messi, who had spent hours grinding on the training ground, added a genuinely lethal free kick to an Arsenal that already had no obvious hole in it. Poor Sevilla, in particular, seemed to exist mostly so that Messi could beat them in finals. Barcelona became so dependent on him that when injury forced him out, the whole side often collapsed without him. They coined a word for it back home: Messi dependencia. The entire machine ran on one man, and everyone knew it, including the men being paid to stop him. And in the middle of that era came a night that plays like a horror film. if you happen to support Paris Saint-Germain. March 2017, the Champions League round of 16. Barcelona had lost the first leg in Paris 4-0. No team in the history of the competition had ever recovered a 4-goal deficit at that stage. The tie was declared dead on arrival, the pundits rolled their eyes, and everyone went home. Then, at the Camp Nou, the dead thing sat up. Barcelona scored early, then again before half-time. Then Messi, ice cold from the penalty spot, made it 3. Paris Saint-Germain stopped the bleeding with a crucial away goal, and it looked finished until Neymar detonated a stunning free kick and a converted penalty in a matter of minutes. And then, deep into stoppage time, Sergi Roberto stabbed home the 6th. Barcelona 6-1, 6-5 on aggregate. They named it La Remontada, the comeback, and Messi's fingerprints were smeared across every inch of it. A month later, at the Bernabeu, he wrote another myth. Real Madrid had spent the whole game trying to kick him into the front row. And in the dying seconds, Messi scored the winner, sprinted to the corner flag, tore off his shirt and held it up to the Madrid crowd with his own name turned to face them. It was his 500th goal for the club. The message required no translation in any language. And it was around this stretch that someone noticed a statistic that should not compute. Across one entire Champions League campaign, the outfield player who ran the least of anyone, apart from a single defender, was Lionel Messi. People who run the least are usually described as lazy. They are usually substituted at half-time. They are usually not, under any circumstances, the best footballer alive. So the analysts finally did the homework, and the science caught up to what Guardiola had seen with his own eyes years earlier. The sports psychologist Geir Jordet had spent years studying how the very best footballers use their eyes, and found that the greatest ones constantly scan away from the ball to hoover up information before it even arrives. Messi is the patron saint of it. Tracking data from a 3-0 win at the Bernabeu in December 2017 showed him spending around 83% of the entire match simply walking. He jogged for a sliver of it, ran for even less, and sprinted for barely 1% of his time on the pitch. And he was, comfortably, the best player on the field. He scored, he assisted, he created chance after chance while moving at the pace of a man browsing a supermarket aisle. He was no longer a sprinter pretending to be patient. He had become a viper in the grass, motionless, coiled, watching, and then gone before the defender's brain had even finished forming the thought. This is the part of his game that almost nobody gives him credit for, and it is arguably the most terrifying. Managers can plan for one kind of player. If a team has a flying winger, you double up on him. If they have a passer who splits lines, you deny him space and close him down. But Messi could be all of those players, and he could switch between them from one week to the next, sometimes inside the same 90 minutes. Were you preparing for the teenage dribbler, the ice-cold late-game assassin, or the pure goal machine who finishes everything? Nobody knew which Messi was showing up. That question kept opposing coaches awake at night for the better part of a decade. But even a viper eventually runs out of prey. Neymar left for PSG, the great trio dissolved, and Messi entered his 30s as the last king of a slowly crumbling empire. There were still 2 trophies missing from his entire life. One of them had tortured an entire nation for decades, and chasing it down would decide once and for all whether he was remembered as the greatest club player ever, or simply the greatest, with no qualifier at all. For all the trophies stacked in Catalonia, one shelf in Messi's cabinet stayed stubbornly empty. And it was the one his whole country cared about most: Argentina, Maradona's Argentina. A place where football is not a hobby but a state religion, and where Messi, for years, was treated like a false idol worshipping the wrong shirt. He had lost a World Cup final in 2014. He had lost back-to-back Copa America finals. He had once stood in front of the cameras and quit the national team in tears after another penalty shootout defeat. To a loud chunk of his homeland, he was a Barcelona player cosplaying as an Argentine, a genius who saved all his miracles for Spain. That 2014 wound cut the deepest. He had dragged a limited Argentina side all the way to the World Cup final in Brazil, then watched Germany settle it in extra time, and collected the golden ball as the tournament's best player while looking like a man at a funeral. The image of Messi trudging past that trophy, unable to even look at it, became the defining picture of his international pain. Then two things happened. One heartbreaking, one holy. In August 2021, Messi sat down in front of the world's cameras to say goodbye to Barcelona and could not get a single sentence out. Tears, a white handkerchief pressed to his eyes, and the end of a 21-year marriage between a player and the club that had paid for the medicine that let him grow. The boy from the napkin was leaving home. It felt, in the moment, like the final chapter of the whole story. To grasp what was actually walking out of that building, consider one detail. When Messi left Barcelona, the club stitched together a broadcast of every single goal he had scored for them. It began at 11:15 at night. It ended at 4:30 in the morning, more than 5 hours of goals, each lasting only a few seconds. 5 hours. That was the highlight reel of one career, at one club. It was not the final chapter, it was the setup. Because weeks earlier, he had finally broken the curse. At the 2021 Copa America, Argentina beat Brazil in the final. In Brazil, at the Maracana, the single most hostile cathedral in South American football. Messi had his first major trophy with his country, and he had won it in his greatest enemy's own backyard. A detail Argentines will happily bring up to Brazilians until the heat death of the universe. But everyone knew the real trial was still coming. The 18th of December 2022, the World Cup final, Argentina against France. And for about 80 minutes, it was less a match than a coronation. Messi scored, Angel Di Maria scored, Argentina cruised at 2-0 and the story wrote itself in gold. Then Kylian Mbappe remembered that he was Kylian Mbappe. 2 goals in under 2 minutes. The final cracked wide open and tumbled into chaos. Messi scored again in extra time to put Argentina back ahead. Mbappe answered again from the penalty spot to complete his hat-trick. 3-3. And it went to penalties, the cruelest lottery in all of sport. The exact instrument that had broken Argentine hearts so many times before. This time, they held their nerve. Argentina won the shootout, and Lionel Messi, at 35 years old, finally lifted the one trophy that had haunted him since he was a small boy in Rosario watching Maradona become a god on television. They hoisted him onto their shoulders and carried him around the pitch, in almost exactly the way an earlier generation had once carried Maradona. Except Messi had now done the thing that even Maradona, across an entire career of numbers, never managed. He had not simply matched his childhood idol, he had strolled straight past him. For a country that had spent 36 years waiting for a third star on its shirt, and for a player who had spent his entire life being told he could never be their Maradona, it was not just a trophy. For his doubters, it was an apology written in gold. Most legends would have stopped right there. The perfect ending. Lift the trophy, roll the credits, retire gracefully into myth. Messi is not most legends, because 3.5 years later, at an age when the rivals of his youth were long retired or standing in suits on the touchline, he would show up at yet another World Cup and start dismantling records that had stood for generations. Still, of course, refusing to run, which brings us to right now. It is the summer of 2026. The World Cup is spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Lionel Messi is 39 years old. He turned 39 on the 24th of June, in the middle of the group stage, which is a genuinely unfair thing to do to the defenders assigned to mark him. and Argentina walked into the tournament as the defending champions. By every reasonable law of biology, this is the part where the aging great fades with dignity. Plays a few tidy passes, waves to the crowd, lets younger legs carry the weight. Somebody forgot to send Messi the memo. In Argentina's opening match, a 3-0 win over Algeria, he scored a hat-trick and pulled level with Miroslav Klose's all-time World Cup goal-scoring record. Then, against Austria, he did it again. 2 more goals in a 2-0 win, sweeping past Klose to become the leading scorer in the entire history of the Men's World Cup. He also, gloriously, missed a penalty in that same game, because even now, even here, the penalty spot remains the one small act of humility the universe still demands from him. He has now missed spot kicks at 3 consecutive World Cups. The man can bend the geometry of a football pitch to his will and then miss from 12 yards with an open goal begging. There is something almost reassuring about it. Argentina rested him for stretches of the final group game against Jordan, and he came off the bench and scored anyway, because naturally he did. That goal made him the first player in history, 6 goals in the group stage alone. 19 career World Cup goals, more than any human being who has ever played in the tournament, man or woman. In front of some of the largest travelling crowds the tournament has seen. In Dallas alone, an estimated 100,000 Argentine fans flooded the area for a single group game, turning an American football stadium into a transplanted slice of Buenos Aires. They did not come to watch a team. They came to watch one man walk slowly across the grass and remind the planet why he is impossible to defend. And how exactly is he doing this at 39, against defenders young enough to be the sons of the men he tormented back in 2006? Exactly the way Guardiola taught him 17 years ago. He walks. He scans. He conserves. Across the 2022 tournament, he covered more ground at walking pace than almost anyone else on the pitch, and 2026 is no different. His teammates do the running for him. Rodrigo de Paul, so devoted to the cause that they call him Messi's bodyguard, chases and presses and wins the ball back so his captain never has to. Around him, an entire generation of Argentine engines burns their fuel so that Messi can spend his only in the seconds that decide a match. He is the walking man at the dead centre of a machine built entirely to let him walk. And when the gap finally cracks open, when a tired defender takes one lazy step at the end of a hot afternoon because his brain saw the opening a full beat before they did, the pattern library he started building as a sick, undersized kid in Rosario is now the deepest and most complete in the history of the sport. Look at the whole arc of it. The boy whose own body was supposed to fail him. The winger whose hamstrings very nearly ended everything before it began. The player who was ordered to slow down, and who turned slowing down into the deadliest weapon football has ever produced. He never became faster than everyone else. He became smarter than everyone else. He stopped chasing the game and started reading it. And once you can read the future, you no longer need to run toward it. You simply wait, perfectly still, for it to arrive at your feet. There is a poetry to it that even a sardonic narrator has to respect. The kid who was told his body would betray him is the last of his entire generation still standing at the very top precisely because he learned earlier than anyone else how to spend that body carefully. As this is being written, Argentina are through to the knockout rounds and preparing to face Cape Verde in Miami. The favourites are circling. Mbappe is matching him goal for goal at the top of the scoring charts. A 19-year age gap between them that seems to bother Messi not at all. And somewhere in a stadium drenched in pale blue and white, a 39-year-old is walking slowly across the grass, head turning right, left, right, quietly drawing the map. The last time he finished drawing that map, an entire nation became world champions. So here is the only question left worth asking. Can the man who refuses to run do it one more time? Or has time, at long last, become the one defender that even Lionel Messi cannot read? We are about to find out. For 20 years, coaches everywhere have preached the same gospel: run more, press harder, never stop moving. Messi looked at all of it, quietly decided it was wrong for him, and became the greatest of all time by doing the exact opposite. He turned walking into a threat, patience into violence, and standing still into the most feared weapon in the game. If you enjoyed this one, we made a full breakdown of the tactical madness that let Guardiola build an entire empire around a player who would not run. It is the perfect next watch, and it is on screen right now. And do subscribe, because this World Cup is not finished yet, and neither, apparently, is he.